People love they love stories, and this evening you're going to hear about one of the most improbable yet enduring love stories of the past few decades. Lucinda Franks has turned her talents as a journalist and a writer on herself and on her husband of 36 years. 36 years. Robert Morgenthau. Lucinda's is the story of a high-profile marriage that not only is fascinating in its own right, but also carries lessons for us all. Lessons about romance, about partnership, about the lasting attraction of opposites. Lucinda was in her mid-20s, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, when she ended up involved with Bob Morgenthau, who was on the cusp of what would become a very distinguished career as the district attorney for New York County. She was a free-spirited radical activist. He was a rather reserved attorney, a member of a very prominent family, a symbol of the establishment. And he was already in his mid-50s, a widower with 5 children. Lucinda's book, Timeless, provides a candid inside look at the challenges and strengths of her marriage. But it also sets the relationship in the history of the times, particularly in the context of a number of Bob Morgenthau's most famous criminal cases. As the Boston Globe review put it, quote, "The book chronicles not only a marriage, but an era." Would you please join me in welcoming Lucinda Franks?
Thank you, Brad, and thank you all for coming today. It's an honor to be at Politics and Prose and to be addressing you. I would like to begin, if you can hear me. Can you hear me? All right. I'd like to begin with a few pages of the early part of my book, Timeless. The last thing I wanted to do was marry my husband. Bob Morgenthau was a widower, almost 3 decades older, came with 5 children, a cat, and 2 dogs, and resided in a suburban house barely touched since the death of his wife 5 years before. It looked like this. On the lowboy in the hall was a mound of unopened mail that a casual breeze could have sent cascading to the floor. The chintz sofa, with its fat golden flowers, had gone vapid. The illusion of spring bounty passed to winter gorse. Little crystal bowls were filled with shriveled nuts. And not only that, this man, this stereotype of the bourgeoisie, had the power to put me in jail. And this was supposed to be the man of my dreams. I had barely escaped incarceration anyway, emptying balloons of pig's blood on drafts files in various cities, trespassing on government property, and chaining myself to the wrought iron White House fence. It was the early 1970s, and I felt a gnawing shame whenever I thought of Vietnam, which was much of the time. An ethos of death permeated my generation. That long after we were losing the war, we were still dropping almost 3 million tons of bombs on Cambodia made me crazy. That we had killed student protesters for no good reason made me crazy. If you were intelligent and young, you were trying to figure out how to be sane in an insane world. It never occurred to me that a member of the establishment, a man born into the same culture as the deluded architects of the Vietnam War, would be the answer. Bob Morgenthau came from one of New York's most distinguished German Jewish families who were steeped in statesmanlike politics. For those who don't know this, Bob's and Henry's grandfather Henry I was the ambassador to Armenia, or to Turkey, and blew the whistle on the Armenian genocide and wouldn't stop harping on this until he was fired by President Wilson. His father, Henry Jr., was the Secretary of the Treasury to FDR and had done as more than anybody in the cabinet. He was the only Jew in the cabinet to save Jewish people during the Holocaust. I was steeped in Gentile society, raised in a Boston suburb where the men wore yellow pants and red jackets, and the lawns were trimmed as short as their haircuts. I let it all hang out while Bob kept it in. He was cautious, steady, a sloop balanced at dead center. I was a catamaran racing breakneck through every channel I encountered. While he was aggressively enforcing the law, I had become dedicated to breaking it. The very notion that we should come together was an oxymoron. Some months later, I can't get enough of him. I switch from channel to channel, trying to understand his baffling persona. The husband I know has the sweet cadence of an oboe, and the husband I don't speaks with an Old Testament fury. Out in the world, you leave a heavy footprint, Bob, but here at home, you come so softly through our door, I can barely hear you. You greet me with that little smile, crescent moon against a sky of gold, then cast your eyes down and look up shyly, like a bird that cannot be caught. I, however, have walked happily into my cage. Recognized for my journalism, I could fly anywhere I wished. But you are a public icon, and my mission is clear. Take care of him, your friends warn me grumpily. He is a national treasure. The disapproval of our friends and family brought us closer together. We were so alike in dash and spirit, no stereotype could fit us. We were giddy with the concept of agelessness. The years between us had closed. If one day the gap widened and we couldn't love each other with our bodies, then we'd love with our minds. Words by the million have been printed about you, but none have revealed your real life, your secret life, which is that you belong to me. Last night, the city of New York owned you, but now, as the sun rises, you are mine. Light falls upon your exquisite forehead, your extravagant Roman nose. The hand beneath your cheek rumples your lips. I gently place my fingers on your lids and feel the rapid flutter of your eyes, the wings of a hummingbird. Such are the things that make love ache. Only when I take your craggy hand in mine so soft and round against it, when I run my fingers over the sharpness of your bones, do I remember you are twice as old as I am, twice as worldly, and twice as close to love's end. At times, I felt your heart pounding in the middle of the night so fast it seems as if it will burst through your chest. Terrible things happen to older men in this situation. 2 ancient popes expired in flagrante delicto. So did Nelson Rockefeller, and so, incredibly, did Attila the Hun. I always listen for your breathing. Once when I woke up, I couldn't hear a thing. Your chest was still, no heartbeat at all. I began thumping on your sternum. Breathe, breathe, I pleaded. You jumped up, gasping. You thought I was crazy. But I intend to keep you alive. I will feed you what you love, white peaches dripping with juice, lobsters so fresh they snap up their tails. I will keep you moving and thinking and teach you to shout and to curse. Everything you do will be of importance to me. I will make love stop time. Now at last you are stirring. Who is this I see? You say, yawning. It's your sweetheart, I reply, edging close. Oh, it's my sweetheart. What, you're wearing my knickers? You hook your fingers under the waistband and snap it back. You're also wearing my undershirt. These I love. They have a great deal of character. The edges are frayed, maybe a hole here or there, but they are made of the best cotton, like the silky undergarments of royalty handed down through generations. What do you love best about me? I ask. You have a beautiful back. You run your hands down my spine. That's why I married you, for your back. Really? What about my mind? That's nice, too. I gently punch your arm. No, you say. I've never come yet into a room where you're not the most beautiful one there and the most intelligent, except when you're not in the room because you're late. You slide your hands under my t-shirt, making me breathe sharply. You chatter about the meal you had at a Chinese restaurant today, the crabs that were giant and beautiful. I cover your mouth, muffling your chatter, and plant little kisses down your belly. You are gripping my shoulders and you aren't talking anymore, and the phone rings. Your private line. Ed, hello, you boom. No, it's not too early. Fuck the mayor of New York. Gleefully, I try to grab the phone, crowing, Hi, Ed, and you swat me away. Koch's excited voice is like a clarion, pitched somewhere above the epiglottis, while my circumspect husband's emanates from deep within his diaphragm. The two are equally stentorian, obstinate, and independent. I can hear Koch talking about a young rabble-rouser who shot a guard at a warehouse. They're claiming insanity. Well, if you ask me, Bob, all of these so-called revolutionaries are insane. But that doesn't mean they don't know exactly what they're doing. He'll be charged appropriately, you say. Bye, Ed. Thanks. It isn't one of my friends, is it, this shooter? I ask. I don't exactly know who your friends are, you answer, and are up out of bed before I can stop you. Yes, you do. You know they're not violent. I mean, except accidentally when they blow up some symbol of capitalist hegemony. I'm so proud of you, I say sweetly. I know this guy has to pay the penalty, but I wonder if there are mitigating circumstances, like maybe genuine idealism. And I know you'll do what's right. You don't let anyone dictate to you. Except you say drolly. Now, where's my watch? Sweetheart, it's on your wrist. What would I do without you? I pick out a nice pink striped shirt. Let me make you an egg, I suggest, though we both know I have not bothered to learn an art so bourgeois as cooking. I'll stop and pick up a bagel. I've got to get to work. I can make some hash brownies for you to take to the office, I reply, only half kidding, since you have no idea how well I can bake them. There happens to be a little bell jar in the kitchen, inherited from my last boyfriend, who was an anti-war draft dodger. It's filled with hay-green stuff you've never asked about. I don't use it, but perversely, I don't get rid of it either. I wonder what you think it is, a dried rosemary? Take me to work in your pocket, I say, straightening your lapels, thinking of the death threats you've received. I could be very useful as a spy. As protection, I could keep watch for attackers. I'll be fine, sweetheart. Don't worry. You are leaving me too soon this morning, making me feel unloved, making me love you that much more. You kiss my cheek, pat my bottom, and then you're gone. A haiku floating in the emptiness. This is at the beginning of the book, as I say, and then we are married, but the opposition that we have from both Bob's cousins, family, only one person in his family, his esteemed brother-in-law, Henry Morgenthau, who is sitting here today, Henry Morgenthau III, and his beautiful wife, Ruth, and their 3 brilliant children, one of which is sitting here, Sarah Morgenthau, who is a director in the Peace Corps. They held our rehearsal dinner. The rest of the people around us, including my radical friends, who thought I sold out to the establishment, thought, the Pope had announced that he'd marry Squeaky Fromme. It was just, nobody did that back in the 70s. 2 professionals, 30 years apart. We gave each other a lot. I, of course, gave him a second chance at life, energy, new ideas, adventures. He gave me wisdom, and he gave me a knowledge that you don't have to scream and shout and curse and protest to change the world, that you can change it within the system slyly, slowly, and quietly. And of course, that is what Bob did. He pioneered the prosecution of white-collar crime like it had never been prosecuted before. He reached his long arm out into foreign countries and found corporate thieves and bank presidents that were laundering money for drugs and drug pushers, and also then were laundering money for terrorists. And he indicted 2 of them in Credit Suisse and the Lloyd's Bank of London right before he left office. So he was an amazing person, and we talked about his cases, and we got excited about the stories I was writing. We had a very fine line, or very tough line, fine though, between his profession and my profession. I would never write about anything he was doing, and he would never mess with my stories. So this book is, as Brad said, a political history of the times, as well as a book about marriage and how you cope with the different phases, and how you keep renewing a relationship and stick by it without abandoning it because you have a bad year, or something has happened to disappoint you. We had a very interesting instance where our marriage was a little humdrum. Bob was 90. I was in my 50, 60 somethings. And we decided to go to Portugal. And, things were humdrum. And we had a driver named Frankie. Now, Frankie thought I was the funniest person in the world. Now, you have to understand that in my family, every one of whom are supreme comics, there is no laughter when I make a joke. But Frankie thought I was very funny. He was a photographer. He took picture after picture of me. I saw Bob watching, and then he turned his attention to Bob, went on walks with Bob, and made him feel like he was much younger than he was. And at the end of the trip, we said goodbye to Frankie and we said hello to a new kind of relationship. We both were brought back to the time that we fell in love with each other and remembered how we fell in love with each other. So there's also much inside information about famous cases like the Central Park Jogger and BCCI, and about the CIA's inadvertent complicity in 9/11. There's a lot in the book, but I'd like to open this to questions and see what you think and see if you have anything that you'd like to share. And they can, there's a microphone there and there, or you can just stay where you are, and because I think it's small enough to speak normally. So, yes.
Well, I want to say thank you very much. I read your book, and it was just a fabulous book. And as I was telling you beforehand, it takes so much courage and honesty to say the things you did in the book. And I just wanted to say that. But I do have two questions for you. One, you mentioned in the book about the Bernard Goetz case and the fact that there was that's the very famous case of the fellow who's on the subway. He's approached by 5 African Americans, and he shoots them, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, there was a piece of evidence that was not revealed to the public to the effect that as he was shooting the last African American, he stood over the person's body because he'd already shot him and said something which indicated he wanted to kill him.
Let me give you one more.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
well, let me give you one more. I'm sorry, that's right.
Yeah.
And my question about that is, why wasn't that piece of evidence made public? What was the reason for keeping that secret?
I think that it was a question of hearsay. I'm not absolutely sure because it was a long time ago and I wasn't the district attorney at the time. But I think it was hearsay. And this happens so much in cases. You have a clearly guilty person, and because of some loophole the defense lawyers get, they are not convicted. And Bernard Goetz, the Bernard Goetz case, we play acted that case. I was the victim, and then Bob was Goetz, and then we switched back and forth, and finally at the end of that whole play acting session, he had the answer to what he was going to do, and the city was very divided. Crime was at an all-time high, and half the city wanted Goetz executed, and the other half wanted him set free. So this was a very sensitive case, and I think that's why that piece of evidence got thrown out. And he didn't get a conviction, the kind of conviction he wanted. Bob didn't, but he gets on gun charges. Convicted.
My second last question is, how do you deal with the fact that your husband, who I take it is still alive, is 30 years?
Oh, more than alive. Yes.
Right, very alive. And how do you deal with the fact that, from the very beginning, you're a 26-year-old, and you're marrying someone who's 56 or 57, and day to day, he's obviously older and fading in a way. And you always have the realization he's going to pass, I assume. Do you think a lot about that, and how do you deal with it?
Well, what a question. I do think about it, and whenever I think about it, I start to plan something that we can do together, whether it's a dinner out or a trip somewhere. He is like his brother, Henry, is sitting right here. He is very vibrant, and like your friends here, as I see, he just is so sharp. He writes op-ed pieces and on immigration outrages and on the lack of treatment for PTSD sufferers from Afghanistan and Iraq. So he's very, very much alive. But there are things we don't do together anymore, and there is a divide. But I wouldn't trade being with him, for the very last minute. And, he might outlive me.
Sure. Thank you so much for a great
Sure.
book. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, hi. Oh my God. We went to school together.
No, not quite. But I was at your wedding.
Yes.
We spent our year in London together.
That's
We had
right.
Thanksgiving, and Al Webb, as I recall, was one of our pals. And
Right.
My husband,
Right.
Chris Ogden, was a colleague of
Yes, of course.
yours.
Yeah.
And so I last saw Lucinda at her wedding. You invited us. We had left London and went to Russia to live for the next 3
Right.
years. And so we were just coming into Los Angeles, and where we began another career. And I haven't seen you in all these years, and you're looking fabulous. And
You
were
are too.
A lot of fun.
That's why I thought you were a classmate.
I just would like to ask you one little question. Do you and Bob watch any of these TV shows, Law and Order? Do you have any favorite, The Wire? Do you have anything that you actually have connected all these years?
We watch a lot of reruns of Law and Order. Adam Schiff was, the character of Adam Schiff was based on Bob. And Sam Waterston and a number of the actors and the producer of Law and Order came and followed Bob around and really took his cases and made segments out of the cases. So he was very involved with it in the beginning. I think he thinks that the CSI and the other offshoots are a little far away from his experience. But when he retired, that was our comfort food. Is that we would sit down and watch Law and Order all the time.
How about The Good Wife?
The Good Wife?
Yeah. Is that the name of it? Yeah, the one out of Chicago, the law.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
Well, one more to look up.
Exactly. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Dee Dee. There's got to be a brave person that would ask something. Yeah. Don't have to get up.
I really love your story. My second husband was 26 years older than I.
Oh, wow.
I have a lot of feeling for what you're saying. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about how you met and how your relationship initially began to develop.
Well, I was. Oh, sure. I was asked if I could say a little bit more about how I met my husband and how the relationship developed. At the time, I was with a draft dodger. I was actually harboring him because they had not declared complete amnesty then. And he read the newspapers absolutely obsessively because he hated Nixon so much that he wanted to see if Nixon was going to stumble. In fact, he hated Nixon so much he threw an ashtray at the television once when he was speaking. But anyways, this draft dodger, to his everlasting regret, advised me to talk to Bob Morgenthau because I had been assigned to do a piece on Watergate, the unfolding Watergate scandal. And Bob had been the U.S. attorney, appointed by JFK, done a lot of mafia busting, and had been really beginning his whole white-collar crime era. And he knew a lot about the bank accounts of Nixon's cronies and Nixon himself. So I went to visit him, And we had just come back from London. I had lived in London, as Dee Dee was saying, right after college. And then we had just come back, the draft dodger and me. And we'd only been home for about 6 months. So I didn't know a lot. So I asked very, very detailed questions. You know, how do you spell Wright Patman? And, who is Wright Patman? Things like that. And at the time, Bob thought I was either the dumbest or the smartest reporter he had ever met. And he read my story and decided I was the smartest. So we both had a kind of image of each other based on certain aspects of our characters, or of our aspects of our aspects, okay? He has this magnificent forehead, this wonderful face, and I had on a hippie style poncho, which he to this day calls an Indian rug, and it wasn't an Indian rug, but he couldn't get it out of his mind, and so, I was really into radical activity. He could have put me in jail or had me arrested, but instead he asked me out for a date. He took me to Arthur Schlesinger's house, and I was wearing a platform shoes and my bell bottoms and a nice peasant blouse. I walked in, and there was, the glitterati of New York, all the society ladies dressed in, feather boas on their swan thin necks. They had sweet sequins and palazzo pants. And they stared at me. And a couple of them asked if I worked for Mr. Morgenthau, or was I his driver, things like that. And I was about to run into the bathroom, to get away, and was rescued by Jackie Kennedy Onassis, who walked through the door. And she hadn't been seen for a long time at that point. Was making one of her rare appearances. And all the sophisticated ladies, their jaws dropped. They looked at her and they smiled. And I looked up at Bob, and he was smiling too, but not at Jackie Kennedy. He was smiling at me. And that was the beginning of my knowledge, that I fought for a long time, that I had fallen in love with him, and probably a long time ago, and he with me. So, from then on, our relationship just developed very fast. And, the 30 years just didn't seem to be a problem. Not that I didn't think about it. I really thought about it. And my stepchildren, his children, and how I was going to get, everybody to accept us, and for me to be the right kind of friend and supporter to them. So, you're welcome. Yes.
To ask you to tell the audience that there were two things in there that I also found very moving, one of which I don't believe. Just how did he, on that first date you had with him, how did he get behind the door before you closed it? And I'll ask you. He must be a pretty agile guy to do that.
Bob is very.
What was your question?
Oh, I'm sorry. On a date that we had. Yeah. A date we had. He got out of the taxi cab after he had paid for the taxi cab and walked me to the door. And I said, "Good night, Mr. Morgenthau. Very nice to have met you, and thank you very much." And I went to the elevator, and there he was. I got into the elevator. He got in very quickly after me. And I thought to myself, oh my God, is this some perverted person? One of those politicians you read about, in the National Enquirer. And he followed me to my door, and I had one of those big purses that people carried then, and I stuck my hand out and I shook his hand, and I said, I have to go now, Mr. Morgenthau, and I thank you very much. And I slipped through the door and put my purse there, but I didn't slip fast enough because he was in the door and sitting on the couch before I got even through it. How he did it, to this day, I don't know. But, and he walks, and he has for a long time, he walks very slowly. But when he has to, like when he smells food, he's really a person who loves his food, he'll move very fast, even at 95.
And the second one was a comment by your son at one point about the fact that Bob looked like a grandfather and not a father, and how that impacted him his relationships with his peers in school and so on.
Right. The question was, we had 2 children together, Bob and I, and our first child, Joshua, when he was about 8 years old, came home from school and said, why are people saying that my father is my grandfather? And I had anticipated this question, and the only thing I could do is to explain that different kinds of people, opposite kinds of people, people with great age difference, people of different color, of different religious persuasions, sometimes fell in love, and that there was nothing you could do about that. And so Daddy and I, got married, and Daddy was, extremely healthy and might well outlast me. That didn't comfort him as much as I thought, but he accepted it. But I think it was something that he had to grapple with, until he was an adult, both of the children. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. Thanks so much for sharing your story. I haven't read the book, but listening to you talk, I'm just curious to hear how your career developed within this marriage, how you went from radical to what did you do and how did it develop?
In my career. Well, I sort of had a double life. I was a reporter, first for United Press and International, and then for the New York Times, and then the totally separate radical life, private life, and I kept the two very pretty separate. And after I married, for a while I didn't write. I don't know why, but I couldn't see myself as the wife of Bob Morgenthau going around, meeting Ariel Sharon in Israel and the head of state here and the Israeli Mossad, and all these exciting things were happening, and I felt like I just couldn't live up to it. And then Bob is the one that said, I'm tired of you not doing anything. You have to write. Go to Northern Ireland. There are these 2 women called the Peace Women who are trying to bring peace to Northern Ireland. He booked me a ticket on a plane, and before I knew it, I was off. And that revived my career. It was really because of him. And from then on, I went to doing pieces for the New Yorker and for the Times, and this is my 4th book. So we had parallel careers that really, were very lucky to be each having, a modicum of success. Yes. You don't have to get up.
How old were Mr. Morgenthau's children when you were
That is a very good question, because the two of them were my age. Yes, I know the gentleman went, and it's. I'm going to read you a little passage in a minute about relating to that, but it was very difficult for them, for the older children. There was one who was 1 year older, one who was 1 year younger. These were girls. Then there was his son, who was 19, and his daughter, Barbara, who was 13 and adorable. And we became very close, and she helped everybody get together. But it was, I think, when a mother dies, the children step into her place, in a sense, and become primary in their father's eyes, or think they are primary in their father's eyes. And they are, until the father meets another woman that he loves. And so in a sense, they felt replaced. And in a sense, because I'd had so much success, that he was getting a better version. And they felt a sense of betrayal, that he had betrayed his wife, their mother. So this all was very difficult for them to take, for me to handle. And it took a while, but it ended up very, very well. So, yes.
Hi. I really would like to go back to one of your last points you made before questions, when you said that one important thing you learned from your husband was that you don't always need to shout to sort of enact change, and that you can sort of let things sort of passively happen and sort of organically happen. I'm curious if you could elaborate more on that, and sort of, obviously at times there are times to shout and are times to sort of, stay
Right.
patient, and sort of maybe you can speak to, sort of add more to that, and when would you say is okay to shout, and when is to sort of let things sort of happen?
Right. Did everyone hear that? Okay. The question was that I learned through Bob that there were other ways to change the system except by shouting and protesting. And the gentleman asked, when do you shout and protest actively, and when do you work very quietly through the system to change it? And I think it really depends on the situation. The Vietnam War, our friends and friends of friends were dying every week, thousands upon thousands of them. And, we were young, had broken away from a generation of strict, protective parents. And it was our time to shout. But what I learned from Bob was that if you wanted to do something like, if you hated the death penalty, in order to change the death penalty, if you were in a position to change the death penalty like he was, is to not seek it for loopholes, because of loopholes, and just go ahead and slyly work through the system. And he did. He wiped out the death penalty in New York, and took out a lot of big corporate giants. I don't know if that really answers your question, but it's a good one, but it's a complicated one. Is there any more questions? Because if there isn't, maybe I'm just going to read you one little section, because I'll ask a question of myself that people ask a lot, and that is, have you noticed that you married somebody old enough to be your father, and did you really marry your father? This question at first was not very welcome, but when I came to grips with it, I wrote something that doesn't exactly explain it, but it touches on it. How strange and beautiful it is, falling in love with someone who has lived twice as long as I have. I believe that love is no accident, no whisper from a random universe. It comes from deeper channels of longing and recognition, a collection of tiny lights that gathered force long ago. The boy with long fingers sweeping the keys of a piano, an uncle's laugh, a teacher who always listened, and the one who precedes them all, the Father. The thing about him you never forget, his hands circling your waist, flying perilously in the air, sun-blinded, grains of sand rubbing against your cheek, your chubby hands smoothing back the soft bristles of his hair so they spring up again like soldiers. Then in a flash you stand head to head, face to face, and he walks away, for you have become too mature, too near, a danger. Was it something you did? You are confused, guilty. An ineffable longing takes over, and then eventually is forgotten. The years go by, and one day you meet him again. The thistly chin, the bright smile, and behind his glasses, the love that was always there. He's not your father, but he is everything you wanted him to be.